The drone footage started as a geology experiment. September 2023, a desert researcher testing erosion models over the Mojave scrub noticed something metallic under the dunes, just a glint caught by the drone's midday pass. When the camera zoomed in, the shape became clearer. A rectangle of rust, half buried, the roofline of an old sedan. The coordinates placed it 17 miles from the nearest service road, in an area officials once called dead air, because even radio signals vanished there. 2 days later, deputies from San Bernardino County hiked to the site. The sand was packed like concrete, sculpted by years of wind. When they dug down, the first thing they saw was chrome lettering, Pontiac. The second was a California license plate, the numbers still legible through dust, 2FHR 963. Within hours, a retired detective recognized it. The plate had been entered into NCIC back in 1992 under one of the county's longest-running disappearances, the Mojave Four. 31 years earlier, 4 college students from Cal State Fullerton, Jason Lau, 21, Brittany Hayes, 20, Marco Santos, 22, and Emily Greer, 19, had vanished on spring break while driving to Las Vegas. Their last call to family came from a payphone near Barstow. After that, nothing. No tire tracks, no credit card charges, no bodies, no car. The case haunted investigators through the 90s. Endless searches yielded only mirages. A helicopter pilot once thought he saw a glimmer of glass south of Kelso Dunes, but windstorms erased the trail before ground teams arrived. By 1998, the Mojave Four became another desert ghost story. Students swallowed by heat and silence. Now, 3 decades later, their car had surfaced from the sand like a time capsule. When the first images hit local news, the desert town of Baker erupted with curiosity. Reporters camped by the sheriff's perimeter tape. Drone operators who'd once filmed abandoned mines suddenly pointed their lenses toward the excavation. But for families who'd lived half their lives waiting for answers, the discovery reopened an old wound that never healed. Brittany Hayes' mother, Ellen, was 72 now. She'd spent her daughter's entire adulthood frozen at age 20. When detectives called her that night, she didn't cry. She just said, "Tell me if the keys are still inside." The next morning, forensic teams began unearthing the Pontiac. Wind-blown sand had filled every cavity. The windshield was opaque, side mirrors snapped off, tires shredded to ribbons. Yet inside the driver's seat, preserved by arid air, sat a cracked leather wallet. Inside it, Jason Lau's student ID. Reporters called it the desert that remembers. Detective Al Torres, now gray-haired but still on staff, had been a rookie on the original investigation. Standing over the excavation pit, he whispered, "I told everyone back then, this car didn't vanish. It just waited for us to catch up." When they pried open the trunk, they found camping gear, sealed soda cans, and a Polaroid camera wrapped in a towel. The film had fused to its cartridge, but one image still visible through the milky plastic showed the 4 friends smiling beside a highway sign, Kelso 40 miles. That photo had never appeared in evidence before. Reconstructing their final route became the new mission. In 1992, their plan was simple: drive from Fullerton to Vegas through Mojave National Preserve, photograph ghost towns for a student project called Deserted America. Jason, the driver, studied environmental engineering. Marco majored in film, Brittany in sociology, Emily in literature. Friends described them as curious and inseparable. They left campus Friday morning, March 13th, packed with 2 tents, a cooler, and an old atlas. Around 3 p.m., Jason called his brother from a payphone near Barstow, saying, "We might take the scenic route through the dunes, more shots for Marco's camera." That was the last confirmed contact. Saturday. When none of them arrived in Vegas, families assumed car trouble. By Sunday, worry turned to panic. State troopers checked every motel, every rest stop. No one matching their description had checked in. When the search launched, the desert was already boiling, 110 degrees by noon. Helicopters flew grid patterns for a week, but wind erased every footprint within hours. Search dogs collapsed in the heat. By April, all that remained were theories. Some said they'd run out of gas and walked the wrong direction. Others believed they'd stumbled into an old mine shaft. A few darker rumors suggested a military exclusion zone accident, rumblings of unmarked lights, and radio silence. Without evidence, the case froze. Now, the drone discovery promised to unfreeze it. The recovery team lifted the Pontiac in one piece using an air crane. Beneath it, the sand formed a perfect mold, an imprint like a fossil. Investigators found no signs of collision or struggle. The gear shift was still in drive. The keys hung from the ignition. A sheriff's press statement was careful. At this time, we have not located human remains. Further excavation is ongoing. That single sentence fueled nationwide headlines. Car found, bodies missing. Within days, amateur sleuths flooded social media with speculation. Some claimed the friends had escaped and started new lives. Others suggested the bodies had been moved by flash floods or scavengers. Satellite images revealed faint tire tracks leading northeast, then vanishing into dunes. Forensics teams discovered another clue, a film canister wedged beneath the backseat. It contained 12 undeveloped frames. The lab worked delicately to restore them. The first few shots showed ordinary road scenes. The last frame, half exposed, appeared to capture headlights against a wall of swirling sand. A sandstorm, frozen mid-flash, if timestamps were accurate. The photo was taken March 13, 1992, 10:42 p.m., the night they vanished. Investigators now faced two timelines, the one they built 30 years ago and the one the desert had just rewritten. Torres stared at the developed photo under a magnifier. "They didn't disappear in daylight," he said quietly. "They disappeared fighting the dark." As night fell over the Mojave excavation site, wind began rising again, pushing thin sheets of sand across the exposed car. Reporters packed up their gear. Deputies anchored tarps. In the dim glow of floodlights, the desert looked alive, breathing, reclaiming, erasing. Torres turned to his assistant. "We'll be digging more than sand tomorrow. We're digging 31 years of silence." The next morning, when crews returned, half the pit had filled itself overnight, but something else had surfaced in the new light. A strip of fabric caught on a sage branch 50 feet away, bright red, weathered but unmistakable. Emily Greer's scarf. And just like that, the desert spoke again. By dawn, the desert had changed again. Wind erased every footprint from the day before, as if the Mojave itself were reminding investigators who was really in control. The excavators started early, working in silence, carving through dunes that hummed faintly under the sun's heat. The car, once buried to its windows, now sat on steel supports, its undercarriage finally visible. The desert had embalmed it perfectly, like a body that refused to decay. Detective Al Torres crouched beside it, brushing dust from the wheel well. "They didn't crash," he said. "They just stopped." He'd been repeating the line since sunrise, like a prayer. The scarf found the previous evening was sealed in evidence. DNA later confirmed it belonged to Emily Greer. But what startled the lab wasn't who it belonged to. It was how well it was preserved. The fibers had been shielded from sunlight for decades, meaning it hadn't surfaced until recently. A storm must have dislodged it, the same storm that uncovered the Pontiac's roof. The desert hadn't just hidden them. It had chosen when to give them back. The next major clue came from inside the car. Forensic techs removed the glove compartment and found a cassette recorder. The tape was brittle, warped, but when gently rewound and digitized, faint voices emerged through static, wind howling, and engine idling, and Jason's voice saying, "Can't see a thing. We'll wait it out." A few seconds later, Brittany whispered something about sand in the vents, followed by Marco laughing nervously. Then the tape cut off mid-word, swallowed by hiss. The timestamp matched the final photo. March 13th, 1992, 10:43 p.m. Theories multiplied. Some investigators believed they'd parked to wait out a sandstorm and suffocated when air vents clogged. Others suspected carbon monoxide poisoning. Engine running, windows sealed, but there was one problem: no bodies. By the third day, excavation expanded to a half-mile radius. Ground-penetrating radar scanned every ridge. On the fourth morning, a sonar unit detected anomalies 300 feet from the car, 3 compact shapes beneath 6 feet of packed earth. The site fell silent as they began to dig. The first object uncovered wasn't bone or fabric. It was metal, the handheld video camera, early 90s Sony model, encased in cracked plastic. The tape inside had degraded, but lab techs managed to retrieve short segments. The footage was grainy, shaky, showing the inside of the Pontiac lit by headlights. Marco held the camera, joking about documenting the apocalypse. Emily sat in the passenger seat, hair whipping in wind. Jason's voice said, "Turn it off, save battery." The frame jolted, then showed something strange, a faint white blur, moving outside the window, like headlights through fog. Except there were no other cars for miles. After that, nothing. The footage ended abruptly, the camera falling sideways. The rest of the tape had fused. When investigators plotted the direction the car was facing that night, it didn't match their intended route. They'd turned off the main track onto an unmarked service road that led deeper into the dunes, miles from any map. Torres believed they'd been chasing something. Maybe the light they saw through the storm, maybe an illusion. Curiosity killed their compass, he told reporters. By day 5, radar located 2 more anomalies. Excavators unearthed partial skeletal remains. 3 sets clustered close together under a collapsed sand ridge. The bones were bleached white, the positioning suggesting they'd huddled together. Dental records confirmed them. Jason Lau, Brittany Hayes, and Marco Santos. Emily Greer was still missing. When the news broke, the families gathered outside the coroner's office in Victorville. Reporters expected anger or tears, but the parents stood quietly, holding hands. After 31 years, the waiting had ended. Ellen Hayes spoke for them all. At least they weren't alone. Investigators, however, weren't done. Inside Jason's deteriorated backpack, they found a notebook. Pages stuck together, but legible in spots. His handwriting, scrawled and uneven, described the storm. Wind like water, feels like the sand is rising, not falling. Marco says lights ahead, maybe a road sign. Another line read, "Emily keeps saying she hears something under the car." Torres studied that note late into the night. "Under the car," he repeated. What did she hear? 2 days later, he found out. A metal detector sweep beneath the Pontiac's final position uncovered a shallow cavity. At first, techs assumed it was natural erosion, but inside, wedged between sandstone, lay a 4th set of bones, smaller, curled into a tight position, one arm stretched upward as if reaching through the earth. The remains were identified as Emily Greer. She'd been trapped directly under the car. Forensic reconstruction suggested that during the storm, the shifting sand collapsed one side of the vehicle. Emily, possibly outside at the time, had been buried instantly. Jason and the others likely tried to dig her out until exhaustion overtook them. The car's running engine created an oxygen vacuum inside, accelerating carbon monoxide buildup. They fell asleep one by one. It wasn't violence or conspiracy that took them. It was the desert's simplest weapon, air itself. Torres recorded his summary in the case file with a single line. They never left the car. The car left them. As recovery teams packed up, a new storm rolled in. Wind curling around floodlights, sand hissing against metal. Deputies covered their faces, glancing nervously at the horizon. Torres stayed until the last piece of evidence was loaded. He looked back once. The pit where the Pontiac had rested was already half filled again, erasing weeks of work in minutes. "She's taking them back," he murmured. By the time crews returned the next morning, the site looked untouched. Only the tire imprints of the air crane remained, fading fast. Months later, when the final lab report arrived, it included one more strange finding. The Polaroid film recovered from the car, the one showing headlights through sand, had a faint reflection visible when enhanced under spectral analysis. Not a person, not a vehicle, just a single raised hand on the glass, pressed from inside. Investigators couldn't confirm whose it was. When reporters asked Torres about it, he said, "People always think the desert is empty. It isn't. It's just waiting." The Mojave Four were buried together in Fullerton that spring. Their gravestone read, "We followed the light." But even as the families found peace, the desert held one last secret. 3 weeks after the burial, a new drone survey of the excavation zone picked up something glinting near the pit's edge. Rangers hiked out to investigate. Buried in fresh sand was a single Polaroid photo, their last, somehow ejected from the storm that reclaimed them. It showed the same 4 friends standing by their car at dusk. Jason's arm around Marco, Brittany holding up 2 fingers, Emily facing the camera with wind in her hair. Behind them, the horizon shimmered gold. At the bottom, in black ink barely legible after decades, one word was written. Almost. Approximately 2007 words. Spring 2024. The Mojave was blooming again. Tiny bursts of yellow wildflowers had pushed through the same sand. The desert never forgot. It just waited until it was ready to speak. Detective Al Torres retired the same week the Mojave Four were laid to rest. He'd served 37 years in the department, most of them chasing ghosts. The file labeled 1992 missing/student vehicle had followed him across 3 offices, outlasting every partner he ever had. When the case finally closed, he placed the file in the archives himself. Then he just stood there, hand on the drawer, unable to let it go. "You don't solve deserts," he whispered. "You just listen long enough for them to answer." The county declared the site a protected memorial. A small plaque was installed at the edge of the dunes, its inscription simple. "In memory of Jason, Brittany, Marco, and Emily, the Mojave remembers." By summer, tourists began showing up. Photographers, hikers, curiosity seekers. Rangers found stacked stones, forming makeshift shrines, Polaroid prints wedged between them. Someone left an old cassette player playing faint static, like the recovered tape. It sounded like wind, but if you listened long enough, you could almost hear voices in it. Ellen Hayes visited in July with her grandson, a film student. They stood on the ridge where the car had once been, the heat shimmering so hard it blurred the horizon. "They died doing something ordinary," she said. "Driving, laughing, trusting the road. I hope they're still together somewhere it's cooler than this." The investigation wrapped quietly. Forensics confirmed carbon monoxide poisoning, exposure, and suffocation as the combined causes of death. There were no other vehicles, no signs of foul play, no hidden stories. Just 4 kids, a storm, and an unforgiving night. But closure didn't mean peace. Torres still couldn't shake one detail: the Polaroid that surfaced 3 weeks after the burial. He'd seen it himself. The ink on the bottom, the word "almost," was written in a style that didn't match any of their handwriting samples. The photo had been trapped under sand for decades. How had it reappeared after the excavation ended? He sent it to the lab for dating. Results came back inconclusive. The chemicals on the film were modern, as if it had been exposed recently. He didn't tell the families. some mysteries were better left sacred. In August, an independent drone research group returned to map the area for erosion studies. One operator, reviewing his footage frame by frame, noticed something strange. In one pass, the sand near the memorial rippled with a faint pattern, 4 elongated depressions, perfectly parallel, like footprints heading east. On the next pass, seconds later, the marks were gone. He sent the video to the sheriff's office. The file made its way to Torres, out of habit, even though he was retired. He watched it 3 times, then deleted it. "Let the desert keep its illusions," he said. Still, he couldn't help visiting the site again in September. The wind was calm that day, the light soft and golden. He parked near the marker and walked out alone. The sand was warm underfoot, fine as flour. He stood where the car had once rested, closed his eyes, and listened. It was almost silent, just a faint hum in the air, a vibration so low it felt like breath. "You're free now," he murmured. "All of you." Then, faint but real, came a sound behind him, a single, brief click, the sound of a camera shutter. He turned, but there was nothing. Just a flicker of light as the sun hit a shard of glass, half buried nearby. He reached down, brushing away the sand. It was a fragment of the Pontiac's rearview mirror, edges dull, reflecting his own face. He smiled, pocketed it, and whispered, "Almost." He never went back after that winter. The recovered evidence from the case went on display at the San Bernardino County Museum. The cassette, the Polaroid camera, fragments of the car's emblem, and copies of the final photographs. Visitors moved quietly through the exhibit, the air-conditioned stillness somehow heavy. The curators placed the photo of the sandstorm under soft light so that when you walked past, the swirling pattern seemed to move again. Beneath it, a plaque read, "March 13th, 1992, the desert took them home." Leah Lau, Jason's niece, gave a short talk at the opening. "We always think the desert is empty," she said. "But it isn't. It remembers what we forget." She pointed to a photo of her uncle smiling at the camera, wind in his hair. He was only 21, but he saw more of the world in that one trip than most of us ever will. A month later, a park ranger emailed Torres an image from a tourist drone. Nothing special, just a landscape shot of the dunes at sunrise. But when Torres zoomed in, he noticed 4 faint silhouettes near the ridgeline. Blurred, distant, impossible to identify. Maybe tricks of shadow, maybe not. He never shared it publicly. He printed the frame and pinned it inside his study. Underneath, he wrote a single line, "Somewhere, the road keeps going." Years later, the storm that buried them returned. A rare wind event swept across the Mojave, covering the memorial under 20 feet of new sand. When crews returned to clear it, the plaque was gone, but the drone camera that documented the storm captured something breathtaking. As the last gust faded, the dunes rippled into a shape that mirrored tire tracks stretching toward the horizon, 2 parallel lines etched by nature, fading slowly into the distance before the wind erased them again. The meteorologist called it coincidence. Torres, watching the clip from his kitchen table, didn't agree. "They finally got back on the road," he said softly. The footage went viral that week, titled "The Desert That Breeds." Commenters around the world left messages. The Mojave keeps its promises. They were never lost, just delayed. Almost means not over. At the edge of the dunes, the wind still whispers through the sage and mesquite, reshaping everything, erasing and rebuilding like memory. Somewhere beneath it all lies a Pontiac, a Polaroid, and the ghosts of 4 friends who followed the light until the night took them. And every time the sun hits the sand just right, the desert flashes back. One bright glint, like a camera catching its breath. One more frame in a story that refuses to end. Because in the Mojave, nothing truly disappears. It just waits for its turn to be found. 1.